Hello and welcome back to the Kindness Code. My name is Carmel Sawbury and I am here with the wonderful, extremely knowledgeable Chelsea Bailey. And today, Chelsea, we're going to talk about the 2 a.m. shift. What do we mean by this?
Anyone listening that is working in residential childcare in particular will know. But the 2 a.m. shift, we're talking about that really, really hard period of time for the children and for the adults. And it can be where some of our most brilliant therapeutic practice can take place. But if we don't do it in the right way and we're not careful, it can also be where we can cause some of the most damage. So it's a really important conversation for us to have.
Because often we do have incidents at night. And I just think when I came, when I'm at the homes, I thought, they've been on shift sometimes since 8 a.m. They're meant to be sleeping in. They've done all the work during the day and then things go on at night. And it's really, really tough. But why don't we first look at why are nights so challenging for our children?
Yeah. Loads of reasons, but the key things to think about is that nighttime can be a really scary time for children. Any child, I think any parent can probably relate to bedtimes being difficult and, scared of the dark, what might happen. But particularly if you looked after children, we come in with a lot more challenges. Nighttime doesn't feel as safe. That could be because nighttime has been a time where really difficult things have happened to a child. That could be, um, you know, uh, various traumatic memories that can surface when it gets dark, when it's bedtime. It's when children are left alone. So the safe people are not around them anymore, and so that can feel very unsettling, unnerving, and unsafe. So their nervous system is starting to go a little bit off kilter, a little bit offline when it's bedtime. The predictability and the routines that exist in the daytime are not there. That there's people around. We know what's coming next. We know, what time school is, what time dinner is, whatever. But at nighttime, that goes away. And so it can just feel like I've got to just try and fall asleep and wake up in the morning and hope that everything's going to be okay. But I can't fall asleep. And when you are dysregulated, when you are not able, when you do not have the skills to communicate what that might be feeling like for you, that can then look like dysregulation. And that dysregulation can be all types of things. It can be, night terrors and nightmares, or it could be, I'm absolutely not going to bed. And it could be unkind words, harming others. But really, what's going on is children are saying, please don't leave me right now.
Which I guess at the end of a long shift, and especially if you're trying to go home, or you either sleep in on the night or the night boat's coming on, you just want to think, I've done the work, why aren't you going to? But we think even as adults, I think if I have a busy day and my head's going, and then all of a sudden when you get into bed, there's no distractions, and you're sitting with your thoughts. And this is what our kids are doing. But their thoughts aren't this busy stuff. Their thoughts are often probably quite traumatic and sad, aren't they?
For sure. And that's really noisy and it's really scary. And it doesn't mean that every child is struggling at nighttime because something difficult has happened to them at nighttime. It could be that, but it could also just be, I don't like being alone. I don't like the noises that are going on in my head. I don't like how it feels when my safe people are not around me. I don't like that the busyness has gone away, that the sound that I normally hear, you know, when I think about where our homes are set, they're all quite rural, beautiful countryside settings, but we're also working with children that possibly come from very rural areas, and they're used to noise, passing traffic, sirens, whatever it might be. To be somewhere that you and I deem as really beautiful and peaceful, that peace and quiet can be louder than ever for some children. And so separation anxiety, those types of things, it just creeps in at nighttime. And if you don't have the skills to be able to say out loud, "Oh, could you just stay with me a bit longer because I'm feeling a bit frightened?" If you don't have the skills to say that, or you feel embarrassed to say that, or whatever the reason might be, what can I do to make sure people don't leave? And that's the other thing to remember in a residential setting, is everyone's going home. So you might have 4 adults with you all day long, with other children, and it's, the hubbub of the goings on in the home. And then, sort of it might get to 11 o'clock, that sort of time. Your night person comes in for the night. One member of staff might go to bed if you have someone sleeping in, and everyone else is getting in their cars and going home to their families. And the children know that. And that's not a nice feeling of, are you going to come back? When am I going to see you again? What if they've had a really difficult day? They might have said something unkind to one of the adults, and they might be carrying that, and that adult's going home, And they might think, oh God, that's really playing on my mind. And what if they don't come back? What, will that be my fault? This is just another example, but that's heavy to carry. And so I don't want you to leave. Please stay, please stay, please stay. I want all these people to stay around me. And that, even when we're creating chaos, that chaos feels safer than being alone.
It makes so much sense. And the other side, I hadn't even thought of it, these our adults are going home, they're leaving them, and they're going to their families and their lives. And I think it also emphasizes that the adults are paid to be there, which I know that sometimes our children struggle with a little bit.
Mm.
So, as in the other podcasts, we can sit here in the cold, hard light of day in a podcast studio. It makes perfect sense.
Mm.
If you're being on shift for 10, 12, 16 hours, while you might be able to understand that, how you, as the adults, to behave in that situation is still a challenge. What are our adults, our team feeling at 2 o'clock? A child's not going to bed and doing this chaos, which really means they want to be connected, but it's kind of hard because I would not be by myself at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I know that for sure. What's going on for adults who are
Mm.
working in the homes?
Yeah. So glad you're asking that, because it's really important that we are acknowledging that too. I know how it feels to be the adult worker in the home that has had a really difficult shift, and your manager the next day can just say, well, the child, they would have been feeling this way and that way. And, there's lots of, and rightly so, lots of understanding, empathy, unpicking for what was going on for the young person and their brain and their nervous system and all of those things. But I can definitely relate to many years ago feeling like, well, you weren't here and it was really, really hard. And actually, I'm not feeling so great. And it's really important that we can recognize it. We do loads of training around how to support in a crisis, how to do our work, how to connect, how to co-regulate. But we don't necessarily teach that after a 16-hour shift when it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And, you might have, I don't know, you've had a really tough day. You might have had something thrown over you, you've got a drink chucked at you and you're feeling maybe a bit alone. Your staff team might have reduced come the night time. So we do have to acknowledge that it is a really challenging time for the adults too. And there is stuff going on in their bodies physically that they're going to be feeling that we have to, it's our responsibility to help process that. I just said I can remember being the staff member having gone through that. I can also remember being the manager that has also not always possibly had enough consideration for what might have been going on for the adult in that moment. Because of course we exist to support the children and we want to help them heal and work through their trauma. That is what we are here to do. But we absolutely can't do that if we are unregulated adults, if our cups are empty. We just can't do it. So we have to, and I urge anyone that works in this sector or with children to make sure that you are looking after yourselves, each other, and if you are somebody that is a manager or in charge of an organization, that is a really, really big priority, is supporting the adults to work through their stuff and what they're carrying. Because that, when I said at the beginning, it can be where some of the most damaging things can happen. That's what I'm talking about. The damage is to our adults, to their nervous systems, and then by proxy, you know, to the children's nervous systems. How can I ask somebody to co-regulate when they've been at work for 18 hours and they've possibly been hurt or, a plethora of things? But how can we ask that of somebody if we're not giving them the tools and the skills?
So the thing is, if you're a parent and your child was really playing up at night, you can either put them into bed with you and give them the caddy,
Yeah.
or you can't just say, for goodness sake, go to bed and be cross and kind of deal with your own nervous system. Obviously, neither of those are options in residential care. And how how do our team, they know, like part of their brain's going, this is what's happening, I can rationalize it, but the other part's going, I'm exhausted. I've got to go home to my own kids, or this is triggering something else for me, or I'm feeling really vulnerable. What do our adults do
Mhm.
on shift in that 2 a.m. shift? How do they work through that and how do they do what's best for our kids?
Mhm. So I guess it's what I was just talking about, giving our staff the tools, and I guess to break down a little bit more what's possibly going on for an adult. So if, for example, there's violence in the home, that might be towards you, it might be towards another adult, it could be sort of destruction in the home, those types of things, that's going to trigger something in us, in our brains, in our body, a response to that. And I guess the sort of an easy place to go with that to break it down is our fight or flight responses. We know what that is, and most likely going to be full of adrenaline. It doesn't matter how many times you might have experienced it. It's not a nice feeling, and how you manage it is possibly not gonna, it's not necessarily what you want to have to do. It's not. So our nervous system is now activated, and when our nervous system is, when we're in fight or flight, we're not regulated, so we're not able to operate from the right part of our brain. So fatigue, for example, we've talking a lot about it being 2 o'clock in the morning. Fatigue literally does impact your brain function. So if you are very fatigued, it is very difficult for you to access the front of your brain, your cortex, where we need to be for reasoning, for understanding, for risk assessing, for good decision making. That kind of goes a little bit offline. And then we're relying on instinct almost, because that's what our fight or flight response is. So that's really, really hard. And when you've got a team of people, it's a little bit easier because you can lean on one another, you can have a change of face, you can swap out, you can take a breather, those types of things. But we do have to recognize the sort of come down, if you like, from those incidents can be huge. It can be really impactful on the body, and we have to help the adults to work through it. So in the moment, what can you do to answer your question? And again, nearly every time I have these conversations, it's going to sound really easy and really simple. I'll say all the time, slow down. We're going to take deep breaths, and we're going to just try and co-regulate and connect. There's an urgency to fix all of the time. When things are challenging, maybe a bit scary, there's an urgency to fix it. And when it's 2 o'clock in the morning, that urgency becomes greater because it's late, you're tired, you want to go to bed, you want to get home, whatever the reasons might be. And we're attached to this idea that, well, I shouldn't be here anymore. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I should have gone home 3 hours ago. So we have to kind of slow that down. And I think if there was something that somebody could have told me when I was kind of in that role, would be, is going to end, because in it doesn't feel like it's ever going to end. Feels like this is going to last forever, and like there's no way out, and there is, and it will be late and you will be tired, but it will end. And what we need is relational safety, and that's at those moments. The children need a calm, regulated adult to help them feel safe and regulated. And sometimes it's about saying, "Oh, it's okay, I'm not going anywhere. Got you. What do you need?" And sometimes that can really work, because if the children feel you're trying to fight against how they're feeling, they can push more. You just want to leave. You're not here for me. But it's hard to push back against somebody saying, "I'm not going anywhere. It's okay. My car keys are put down. I'm here for you. And if I just need to sit on your bedroom floor until you fall asleep, that's okay. That's what I'm here. That's what I'm going to do." And again, I know it sounds very easy, and it's not necessarily always the response that you're going to get. But in the moment, there really isn't much else you can do other than trying to regulate yourself. Recognize, what am I feeling in my body? I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to do that breath for myself, because my cup is empty right now. And I've got to do what I can in this moment to try and fill it so that I can give this child what it is that they need in this very moment.
So it feels like you're being altruistic, you're being really kind to the child by giving them the time. But actually, if the adults see it as fighting against the child or trying to force that fix, is not going to work, and actually they're in it, it's not what they want to be, but actually, first of all, accepting,
Mm.
and then going slowly, going, if I have to sit on their bedroom floor, having a little chat for an hour, but I stay calm, the child will eventually calm down. But I think just having this convo, we haven't had this one before, that actually the adult is doing what's best for them, not just what's best for the child. Because also, if you then sit on the floor, you're breathing, you're trying to co-regulate, and when an adult's co-regulate, they're actually regulating themselves.
For
They're not just bringing the regulation, they're also regulating
Yes.
themselves. And then it also means the child falls asleep, you get to go home or either back to your own bed if you're sleeping in that night, and your body is wearing less of the stress, and your nervous system is more regulated than if you were trying to rationalize with the child or kind of really, again, go for the quick fix.
Yeah.
For me, that was like a real, and I don't know that we teach our team, or that teens are taught that them being really kind is actually as much about being kind to themselves, but accepting their situation.
Yeah. And accepting, so it to us, and that's probably like a key word. I'm so glad that you're saying that, because accepting it is it. You know, we're here. We are where we are, and I'm going to accept that this is where we are. Because if I keep trying to fight it, I'm not putting that fire out. I'm making it. You know, I'm adding fuel, and that's not what we're trying to do. And all the while you're doing that, like you just said, you're damaging yourself. And if you're feeling scared, anxious, nervous, exhausted, tired, fatigued, if you're feeling those things, the young person in front of you is feeling that tenfold, because you know the the root of all of it is coming from them, from their experiences, from their trauma, from their fears, lived experiences, you know. So yours is a response to their behaviors, what's in front of you, but theirs is a response to real life experiences. Doesn't mean that it might not trigger, you know, it could trigger stuff in us too. You know, we've all got our own stories. We all do this work for our own reasons. And so it could also be quite triggering for us too. So you're right. Just accept, okay, I'm here and this might go on for a while, but that is okay. And actually, when we can accept it and say this might go on for a while, you might go through 2 weeks of it as a team. But if everyone can take that approach, the young person is going to feel so safe. They're going to say, okay, you know, these adults do keep coming back. They do see me. They understand. They make me feel safe. I don't need to keep fighting this, because nighttime all of a sudden is starting to feel a little bit safer for me. And then it will, you know, those types of incidents will start to decrease, which is part of their healing and part of their growth. So slowing it down is really, really important. You know, lowering your voice. We are not problem solving at 2 a.m. in the, 2 o'clock in the morning. We're not problem solving. We're not trying to understand, you know, asking questions and saying, what's this about? And, you know, why are you not just going? We're not doing that. That is for tomorrow. That is for another day. Right now, all we're going to do is we're going to just be calm together. What do you need? You know, sensory items to feel safer at nighttime, weighted blankets, a warm drink, sitting together, using calm voices, you know, creating an environment that feels calm and safe and warm. Those types of things, you know, are what children need. And I talk lots about what you would apply to a baby or a small child and what you would apply to an adult. You can then apply to this sort of middle age of sort of 11 to 15, 16-year-old, if you like. And, you know, if I felt really dysregulated at night time, and I was full of anxiety and I was tearful and I felt angry or whatever, if my partner was there, or if, you know, a friend was there, someone's going to lean into that, and they're gonna you know, tools down, like, it doesn't matter about my bedtime, what on earth, what do you need? And when a baby is up all night crying, we're not furious about it. We're tired. We're tired, but we're not cross at that child. We're not annoyed that this is the situation. We surrender to it and we say, if I'm up all night cuddling this crying baby to make them feel safe and let them learn that as their caregiver, I don't disappear. I'm here all night long. They learn to feel safe, and then over time they might sleep in their own bedroom, for example, you know, in their own cot, and you're not co-sleeping anymore, you know, as a small example. It's the same thing. It's that small baby, that small child doesn't know that they exist independently from their caregiver. And so they need to feel close and know that when they cry, their needs are met and that someone's going to pick them up and, you know, meet their very basic needs. And it's kind of the same thing. It's that separation anxiety I talked about earlier. The children need to learn that the adults around them, when they cry out for our help, no matter what that might look like, even when it looks a bit scary, that the adults are still showing up and that separation anxiety, that feeling of being alone becomes less and less and less so that they start to feel safe.
Because would it be fair to say most of looked after children didn't get that early years um, love and comfort?
I don't know if we could say that most. I think that it's definitely something that would be common and, wouldn't be something shocking to hear for all sorts of individual reasons. But even if that did exist in small early years, what we do know is that even in their later years, that hasn't been consistent. Care hasn't been consistent. And it doesn't even mean it hasn't been consistent from their own parents. It's the care system where it's not been consistent because they're going from placement to placement to placement to placement. A child that comes and lives in a residential home might have had 10 foster placements and 2 residential placements by the time they get to you. So that feeling of rejection, abandonment, when will this be my last day here, exists in them deeply because what is very common is for multiple placement breakdowns again and again and again, which is going to fragment your attachment style.
And if a child is particularly disruptive in the evening, there's a chance that they're going to have their placement ended because actually, if you're a foster carer, that's going to be extremely hard because you don't get to go home at the end of shift.
Yeah.
Um, so it is really, really difficult. So what can we do and what actually helps? So we've got the co-regulation and the acceptance. I guess it's also the whole wider team. When the person's coming on shift at 8 o'clock next morning, knowing that deep understanding that the evening workers have done their best and then they need to give that support to the people who have been up all night, haven't they?
Yeah, yeah. So I talked a little bit about what you can do in the moment, and really the top tip there is to kind of surrender to the situation and be present and connect to help the child feel safe and settle. And that might take a long time, but it's okay. It will end, um, and those things will reduce over time. But there's a before and an after to consider as well, and that's the stuff when we're thinking about employers, managers. That's the stuff that we really cats. Dan Siegel, child psychologist, he talks about a sort of model, uh, window of tolerance is what he calls it. And I guess I'm telling you this because it kind of links back to what I was just saying about our nervous systems. And I think just having the knowledge of this stuff is really, really helpful because it helps us to understand our bodies. And we all hear fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop. Now there's more to it, and that's what we're talking about. It's a very real thing, and I'm sure everybody listening can relate to having experienced that feeling more than once in their life. And the window of tolerance is, if you can imagine sort of being inside a window, that being in that window is the safety part of your brain. It's where we are regulated. It's where we feel relaxed, in control. Everything's calm and going okay. And it's, our stress and anxiety is low, and we're kind of measured in that. And then outside of the window is our hyperarousal responses. So if we were to go below the window, that's our sort of freeze sort of responses. So that is, we might become a little bit more compliant, sort of not as responsive as we could be. So it's maybe disassociating, that kind of thing, feeling a bit more numb, a little bit more, I'm not very present right now. So that's kind of in that area. And then if we were to go above that window, it's another version of hyperarousal, but that's your sort of fight or flight response. And that is where you might become really reactive, angry. You might raise your voice. You might be a little bit more confronting, or you might run away from the situation, be in denial about the situation. So we need to look at what can help to bring us back into that window of safety almost. And keep ourselves regulated, because the other responses, they exist to keep us safe and they're survival instincts, but actually we're not in a life or death situation. And so helping our brains understand that and come back into that safe space is really, really helpful. And that applies to children and adults. It exists for all of us. And so having the tools to regulate is really the message. We're trying to help the child regulate. And as you said earlier, we can't do that unless we're regulated. it's okay if you're not regulated. I think that's really, really important. We have to humanize ourselves and say we're not these kind of robots that just don't have feelings and don't, and like I said, fatigue is, when you're tired, it's a lot. So the before and after, talk goes about what the sort of being in it and the 2, 3 o'clock in the morning looks like. But the before and after, I think is really, really important. So afterwards, the debrief is so important. And I know everybody working in our industry will know about debriefs and will have had them, but it's possibly fair to say that they become a bit of a tick box exercise. You come in the next day, you've got stuff to do, you've now got social workers to speak to, for example, or parents to call, you've got a young person to check in with. So it can be quite easy for the supervisor, the manager, whoever that person might be, to, are you okay? That was a really hard shift. You did a great job. Are you good though? Yeah, cool. Everything's fine. And it can also be very easy, I guess, or inviting as the person that was in it to just kind of go, yeah, yeah, I'm fine. It was a long night, but whatever. I just, it's my day off now and I want to get a good night's sleep, or, I want to have a rest today. But that's not enough. We have to create space to acknowledge, just like we would with the young person. That must have been really, really hard. How are you feeling in the moment? How are you feeling now? Not just emotionally, but physically, where are you feeling it in your body? Helping to provide some tools to help adults understand how to get that adrenaline out of their body, because it is physical. If you were to go for a run afterwards, you would feel much better because it's in your body and you have to release it and you have to let it out. And that cortisol exists in your body is no good. And you can feel really emotional after you've had a big burst of adrenaline. Um, in a positive way, or or true sadness, but it's a release, and you do need to have that release, and that's okay. So holding that space is really, really important. Having that conversation, holding the space, recognizing what was hard, checking in on their nervous system. Where did you go in that moment? What was happening for you, and how do we slow it down and do the repair? Before, again, it's about setting up. How are you starting your day? How are you checking in with the adults? How's everyone feeling? Because if you're coming to work already feeling a little bit wobbly, you might have some of your own stuff going on. You might have had a tough night, might not have had any sleep with your own children the night before, and then you're coming to work feeling a bit tired, and that's going to then impact the kind of day that you have. So having those conversations to begin with, we're setting up the day, we're thinking, we're checking in, how's everybody feeling? If you're working a long day, a 16-hour day, for example, where's your midway check-in? How's everybody feeling? Have we all had some fresh air? Have we all had a brave breather today? Those things are really, really important. And I think that we have to apply our training to those incidents that happen at 2 o'clock in the morning. When we interview people, when we are selling this role to people, that we want to say, come and do this job because it's probably the most important job you're ever going to do. And it's so life changing, and it is. And people want to do it for all of the right reasons. Um, but those reasons can sometimes be forgotten about when you go, oh, I didn't know it was going to be like this. You know what I mean? Because we're not having those conversations enough, and we have to kind of normalize it and say, no, this is going to happen, but it's okay when it does. We know how to manage it. We know what to do, and we can get through it together. And by doing so, when I said at the beginning, some of the best work happens in those moments, that's what I mean.
It's really interesting. Just this whole podcast kind of came about because I was learning so much, and I kind of feel like when we've done some of these with the other people I've interviewed, it's kind of like real life learning and kind of light bulb moments. And we've been doing a lot on. I've been talking to you about supervisions, and I know we do them and we do it all well, and Ofsted's happy.
Mhm.
But sometimes I'm wondering when a manager has been in these instances and they've got so much to do, and then they've got to make Ofsted's all the Ofsted stuff's done, and then they've got to make sure the rotors are done, and someone else has called and said that they I think an RM's job is just about impossible, sorry. So, to actually what we're doing at niche care homes is we're putting in an ops manager, because I think the RM's job and that is deputy manager's job should be just people, team kids,
Yeah.
and all the admin stuff that actually could go with any business, HR and some finance and procurement, has to be farmed out, because I'm not sure that And I think we've got an amazing team, but that real supervision, checking in, because it is tough and it is about really caring for our team, so that they're ready to be there for our children, aren't they? And I kind of this is what I found fascinating is just how tough the RM's job is, and I think also because we live in a different world. I think there's more anxiety, there's more mental health situations for our team as well as our children, and so this has been such a good podcast and such a just understanding of what our team are going through, what the adults are experiencing, and how difficult it is for them, and how we have to really hold space. And I've had some great ideas on how we help them regulate,
Yeah.
and really because leaving shift after a busy night, you're wired, don't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. And put it in your training if you don't already. We say, make sure you look after yourself and make sure your cup's full. And are you looking after your mental health? And, we talk loads about co-regulation and what co-regulation looks like. But are you teaching how to be regulated in the first place so that children can borrow our regulation, borrow our calm? Because that's what children do. They borrow what we're giving them. So if we're giving them our own dysregulation, however that might look, that's what the children are receiving. So they need to receive our calm. But if we don't know how to bring that in a moment of crisis, how can we expect anything more? So make sure you are putting it in your training. Um, you know, Training just for how the staff should be looking after themselves. What is happening in their body? What is going on with their nervous system? What happens when it goes offline? What does the recovery look like? What things can you do to repair and support yourself in those moments? Help the adults feel seen too, because we are asking a lot of them.
Mm.
And they've got their own lives outside of the life that we have in our job. And it's a lot. It really, really can take its toll. Most of the time it doesn't, and I think that's important to say, because it's not all like this. But that's why they can feel even harder, I think, because sometimes you kind of go, whoa, where did this come from? I'm not used to it.
You have weeks of it's like, oh, you're going to the cinema, you're going to big
Yeah.
walks, you're having fun, having laughs, doing a bit of cooking, and sometimes the job is unbelievably,
Yeah.
wow, am I getting paid for this? And other times there's no money in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's a difficulty, isn't it? The up and down of it. When we're doing some great work with one of our team with the breath work, and we're rolling that and more. And actually, this conversations helped me go. This is so important that we double down and we help our adults have all really embedded in them the tools that they need to be regulated when they turn up on shift and be regulated at 2 a.m. If it was me, I want to sit in the corner and cry, going, I'm too tired to cope.
But you wouldn't if you had the skills to.
I think I wouldn't do it anyway, but I just wouldn't feel like doing it.
Yeah, you totally would not.
I totally would do it.
You totally
But
wouldn't.
that's what I would want to do. Just like, I would be awful and tired, and it'd be really, really hard. I'd be
Yeah.
frustrated.
And it is hard, and we're not pretending that it isn't hard, but parenting is hard. And so, it's just about having that stuff in your locker that you can access when you need it. And if we can teach the adults this stuff, if we can teach the adults how to look after themselves, how to understand what's going on in their body, what their own triggers are, and what that might mean for them, and how to work through it, they can teach that to the children too. And so it just, by osmosis, it just exists, and it becomes contagious. And yeah, wherever you can add stuff in, I would recommend, if you can, that you do. If you have a specialist, if you have, like we have a breathwork specialist that works with our staff, and it's not for everybody, but the people that it is for, it's really, really powerful stuff. And then sometimes the young people like to join in a little bit of that. And so you might have therapists. You talked a lot about supervision, and all of that stuff's really, really important. But sometimes just the supervision that isn't so formal, just your manager picking up the phone and just saying, I just wanted to give you a ring because I heard you had a really tough night last night, and I'm so glad you were there, and thank you, but look after you today. That's really important. Switch your phone off from work. It's okay. Just feeling that it's like a warm hug, isn't it? We're not sitting and typing notes and going through the motions of a form, which has its place, but that humanizing ourselves and being a family and a team in those moments of difficulty, is important. And then the adults can start to break down, okay, what did we see? What did it look like? It might have felt like, I don't know, for example, you might hear something like they were attention seeking at 2 o'clock in the morning, but once they are more regulated and rested and repaired, that reframe can then come in and exist, and they might actually, I would say, actually, that young person's nervous system was being affected in that moment, just like mine was. And they were care seeking, they were needing connection in that moment. It wasn't about attention, it was about connection and safety. But it's hard to reach that if you're not in the right regulated frame of mind.
I have loved this, Chels. Again, it's just because we're really carving out this time to sit down and have these conversations. Because I actually have to listen really hard and I can't interrupt because we're doing this show. And it's just really landing. I'm so pleased with the work that we're doing at Niche Care Homes and what we're doing with the Kindness Code, but just really underlining how important it is. We're at the top tips times. I usually won't top tip, but you've got 3 for me today.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could talk about this forever and ever. And, I feel very passionately about it because, yeah, it is really, really important stuff. But I think, yeah, if I can give you some top tips, what would they be? Oh, well, I think we have to think about the before and after, like we just talked about. So I'm going to say, start your day in the right way. Before you're going to support in a moment of crisis, take those deep breaths, regulate and ground yourself, not just for the young person, but do it for you. Fill your cup a little bit in that moment where you can. My tip number 2 is, if a young person, if you feel they're pushing you away, and you feel like you're not getting through, surrender to what's happening in front of you and stay close. Doesn't mean stay so close, we're not in their face, we're not necessarily right next to them, but we are. I'm here for you. I'm not going anywhere. I've got you. You're safe. And then the after is, after a hard shift, after a hard night, a late night, after a 2 a.m. shift, debrief, however that looks for you in that moment. Even if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, try not to go home until you've at least said one thing about how you're feeling. Write it down, journal, whatever it is that you need to do, but do the debrief. But even if it's 5 minutes before you go home, offload that and give your brain the space to process what it's been through before you go home, so you're not carrying it. And I think just one extra tip, I think just thinking about management, because it's our, it's managers' responsibilities and it's organizational responsibility too. I think make sure you are just taking the time to have that informal check-in the next day or whenever the right time is. But it's not always about systems and processes. It's just about saying, that was tough, but I'm so glad you were there. Are you okay? Look after you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Chelsea. This has been a kindness code. I hope you've learned a lot. Hopefully, actually, people listening will know to what where you're working. 'Cause I know we get quite a lot of parents listening as well, but it's around filling your own cup. It's about regulating the self and being a bit kind to yourself as well. Until next time.
Thank you.